Life Audio.
Hello. Thank you for listening to Your Daily Bible Verse, the podcast that examines one verse each day to learn more about God and His will for our lives. I'm your host, Kyle Norman. After a brief message from one of our sponsors, we will listen to today's verse. Today's verse can be found in Mark chapter 2, verse 28. Jesus said, "The Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." What does it mean to observe the Sabbath day? When do you step outside of the busyness of life and observe a day holy unto the Lord? And what does that observance actually look like? For the Jewish people in Jesus' day, this issue was of primary importance in their spiritual lives. After all, the Sabbath was one of the key commandments given by God to Moses on the top of Sinai. In fact, the commandment regarding Sabbath keeping lies at the center of the Ten Commandments, and it's the longest of the commandments given. Obeying the Sabbath and keeping it holy was the primary way that the Jewish people showed their allegiance to Yahweh. And out of that came all sorts of rules and restrictions. Pharisees diligently watched people's actions to ensure that they were obeying the letter of the divine law. On one occasion, the disciples find themselves in the Pharisees' crosshairs. Jesus' disciples, they're going through grain fields, and they begin to pluck some heads of grain. They'd pluck the grain, rub the heads of grain in their palms, and remove the husks, and then eat the kernel. Well, the Pharisees throw a fit, and they charge them with not observing the Sabbath, because in the Pharisees' mind, this was an act of harvesting, which, according to the Deuteronomic law, was explicitly prohibited on the Sabbath day. So in response, Jesus says that the Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath, and that He is Lord of the day. You know, sometimes we make this verse to mean that Jesus throws away the Sabbath restrictions. As Lord of the Sabbath, Jesus sets aside all rules and deems Sabbath keeping no longer important. But notice that Jesus actually affirms the goodness of the Sabbath. He affirms that the Sabbath day was instituted by God as a gift and a blessing to our spiritual lives. Our lives and our faith are made better through observing the Sabbath. Jesus himself abided by the Sabbath day. But Jesus does flip everything else on its head. Because for Jesus, Sabbath keeping was not just about abiding some external list of do's and don'ts. That's what the Pharisees thought. And it's why they were diligent in defining, observing, and policing people's activities. But for Jesus, the Sabbath day is about responding to the activity of the Lord. Jesus enters the Sabbath day, and He meets us there and calls us to Himself. And so the disciples, they can eat the grain not out of some divine loophole, but because they are responding to the call of the Lord of the Sabbath. You know, rules make it easy to keep the Sabbath day very comfortable. For Israel, these rules were the long lists of do's and don'ts. For us, in the past, we had the same in society. We had various, quote, blue laws, which deemed it against the law to have anything except the church open for business. Malls were closed, businesses didn't run, sports games weren't scheduled, and so the day was free, a day of rest. But while Sunday was truly a day away from commerce, was it really a day spent observing the Lord? Were we really responding to the Lord in our midst? You know, equally, it might be easy for us to equate the Sabbath with nothing more than a day of rest. Myriads of books and blogs talk about the Sabbath as nothing more than a day of delight. It's a day to take a nap, a day to listen to good music and enjoy some great food, and generally relax and recuperate. But if we see the Sabbath as nothing more than a day of leisure, well, then the Sabbath becomes very safe and comfortable, doesn't it? It becomes entirely self-defined and entirely under our own control. We know what to do, and we know what not to do. But no matter how neat and tidy our Sabbath observances are, if we do not respond to the Lord of the Sabbath, then we're missing out on what the day is supposed to be. And when we live our faith lives in safety and comfort, well, we often fail to grow. And so the Lord of the Sabbath comes to us, and Jesus makes the Sabbath day uncomfortable. He enters the day not to affirm our comfortable practices and man-made rules, but to call us out of them and into a place of transformation. Jesus stretches us. Now, those moments can be times where we feel moved beyond our previously divine comforts, and they can feel hard and tenuous at times. But obeying the Sabbath is never meant to be just about our private moments of devotion. It is always to be a call to the community to come together and act as the people of God in radical and transformative ways. And so ask yourself today, where is Jesus upsetting what is comfortable and safe in your Sabbath? Where is he calling you to stretch out of your comfort zone, to take a risk, to dare to step further into the kingdom of the Lord? These things might be uncomfortable because they stretch us, and yet it is in that act of stretching that we uncover the true dynamic of faith and experience the miraculous power of Jesus.